Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Today, our very first guest is Hannes Junginger, CEO and co-founder of Carbonfuture, one of the fastest growing carbon removal marketplaces at the moment. Hannes, it's a pleasure to have you here. First off, could you please tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and ultimately what led you to found Carbonfuture?
Yeah, thanks, Violet, for having me. It's really a pleasure to participate in this podcast. And we met before when you interviewed me for the Carbon Herald. So also thanks for all your work for the industry. Much appreciated and needed. Maybe a bit about myself. I didn't start my career in carbon removal because back then when I started, there was almost no industry. I'm a mathematician by education. I have a broad professional background as financial engineer. I worked in risk management and trading in banks and as a consultant for banks. I also have experience in audit, in financial and regulatory audit for the financial industry. So a bit of financing instruments background, a bit of how can you instill trust in activities that need trust because they need to be financed. So that's my background. And when I got more senior in my career, I worked on strategic and credit risk frameworks, and I learned that environmental risks are key to address for companies. That was one angle that brought me closer to emission reduction strategies of companies, and the other angle was in 2018, beginning of 2019, a friend of mine, Hans-Jörg Lerchenmüller, who was then also a co-founder and is now senior advisor to our firm. He approached me because he's coming from like renewable energies and climate tech startups all his professional life. And he started to, I learned from him that emission reductions are no longer enough to mitigate the climate crisis and prevent the worst effects of global warming. So we, in addition, have to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and store it safely for long term. And he started to look into different removal technologies and identified biochar as one of the promising and fastest scaling technologies available already now. He invested in a company, looked deeper into business cases, and realized these business cases only work out if we finance and monetize the climate service that comes with the application of biochar. In this case, or in general, carbon removal has to be properly financed. And so he approached me and asked me if I could not help set up a framework that recognizes the different nature of carbon removal as compared to emission reductions and emission avoidance, and especially also of durable carbon removal that comes at a higher cost as compared to what we call managed storage sites or managed things like forests or soil organic carbon. And with establishing instruments that properly characterize these solutions, then make them also financeable and scalable in the end. That was the starting point in 2019, and I started it together with my co-founder and CTO, Matthias, who is a brilliant software architect and modeler. And we did it a bit as an academic exercise in the very beginning, and then realized the big potential and the big need, and decided to switch our careers and dedicate our talent fully to laying the foundations and especially the trust infrastructure foundations for the carbon removal industry. Yeah, and that was the starting point. We then founded the company January 2020, looked for first funding, business angels, one public endowment we received, and then we kicked it off. That was the very early beginning.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about those very early days? Like, what were the main challenges that the company faced? And you spoke a bit about funding. How difficult was it to attract funding, actually? And what did those first stages look like in general?
I think in general, when you look at the stories of startup founders, there's no one size fits all. Everybody has their individual stories, and also you have lucky encounters with people who make a difference and really help you to realize what you envision, or help you change or adapt your ideas, and identify also silly ideas. So in the very early days, it was super important that we worked closely together with leaders of the industry, and some scientists who thought about carbon removal already a lot, and especially also people from the biochar industry that was already at a certain stage of maturity back then. It has changed a lot and matured a lot since 2019 to today. But we had some leaders who helped us identify where the problems were. And one very important element was that we learned already in the first months that in order to create financing instruments, we, coming from the finance industry, thought about marketplace, reporting systems, and that stuff. And we learned from the people on the ground, and that knew about the problems of actually moving physical carbon around and storing it somewhere, that we need to make sure that the activities actually happen. So what we today call MRV, or digital monitoring, reporting, verification, which is our core product, we already learned in 2019 that we need to build that. So we have to know where the carbon is stored. So in the first, when we really realized that we have to do it, that we have nothing in our hands if we don't have the MRV system in place, it was a bit of a shock, because it was a totally new product we had to build in addition to our certification framework, our workflows dedicated to a marketplace. So that was a hard learning, and and it was clear we need more funding, we need more time, we need to go more deep into that. But in the end, it really sets us apart, and I think we are by far the first firm that looked into digital MRV for durable carbon removal, which is a great advantage today. So that was one of the challenges. You also talked about funding. We found some business angel in our own network, which was super lucky. And with the Startup Accelerator program, we also got some public funding. Okay, it was not huge amounts, but it allowed my co-founder and myself to quit our jobs and to make sure that we can finance our families, at least for a certain time. And so that was really lucky. And then as we transitioned towards a real startup company and look for VC financing, of course, there are totally new types of challenges, like how do you communicate? How do you explain to a broader audience what you represent? What is monitoring, reporting, verification? What is carbon removal? How do you convince a venture capitalist that this will be also something that can make rich people richer, right? So there are a lot of steps to a lot of hurdles to overcome to run a venture finance startup. Yeah. But the early days were are very individual, and have been very individual on our side, and very lucky. And the key was, I think, individuals that were convinced that we are doing the right thing and we are the right team, and solving a big problem.
Thank you. Speaking of MRVs, I remember last we spoke several months ago, we discussed different carbon removal approaches, and you said back then that your biggest bet would be on biochar as the solution that's likely to scale the fastest. Do you still stand by that, or has the situation changed perhaps? And the reason I'm asking is the US government's recent $1.2 billion investment in direct air capture, or DAC for short.
Absolutely. I mean, first thing is like we have a huge challenge ahead of us. So we have to remove gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere and store them at some safe place. So it is pretty clear when you look at the potentials and the costs of the different removal solutions and also the adequacy in terms of deployment regionally or and in which circumstances, that we will need all of these technologies, or many of these technologies at least. And so having said that, we also have to deploy them on the timeline. So when we look at the short term, today we see that the vast majority of actually delivered durable carbon removal is biochar-based carbon removal. That is, like, I think around 90% of the actual removed installed carbon is biochar-based. And so I still think it holds true that that biochar is today the most important removal technology. It is the one that is best probed, and it is already scaling. So we have a lot of data points. The technology readiness level is decent. There are companies that have a high technology readiness level, and there are still a lot of innovations, of course. So I would still say today and tomorrow, biochar carbon removal is the most important, and we can learn the most out of this, because we are looking at real world problems. When we, for example, from an MRV perspective, we roll out our tools, and we can really get feedback from actual projects. Then other biomass-based removal technologies, like, for example, BECCS, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, are, of course, also very important and closely related, because biomass is the photosynthesis is the capture part of CDR. And we already see projects that are around the final investment decision stage, and these projects are typically much larger than the individual and modular biochar projects. So I expect in the coming years, say second half of the decade, a couple of BECCS installations that will be like whales in the market, right? Really big. So we will see steps in the delivery curves based on BECCS projects. And so we see there's a bucket that is bio-based, biomass-based removals, which will scale pretty soon. And then there are two other key technologies which are being rolled out now, direct air capture being one, heavily subsidized, and also with the need of heavy subsidies, because it's big implementations, so large-scale industry projects that need hundreds of millions, or if not billions of dollars for the establishment of a proper and efficient DAC hub with all the infrastructure around it, the pipelines and the storage side. We also must not forget about the technology requirements on the storage side. And these need big investments, and they also have big challenges to overcome. It's not only deploying the technology, it's very much also the availability of renewable energy, because DAC costs energy. I mean, there are more energy efficient and less energy efficient solutions, but basically you need energy. And that is a huge hurdle on top of that. So it will take decades before we can really get in a climate relevant, many decades, I think, before we get in the climate relevant range. Having said that, it's still important. I'm very happy to see these subsidies. And at the same time, I think states and other funders need to be aware of the fact that we need a portfolio, and that direct air capture is not an alternative to massively reducing fossil emissions. And that is also a thing that worries me a bit when I see the developments and how some politicians talk about these programs, these subsidies, and this new industry. Enhanced rock weathering is another another technology that is very promising and will be very important, has a bit of different challenges, as those people who are deep into that know. Here is more on the we don't actually know how fast the weathering happens in specific situations. It's difficult to measure because it's an open system. Similarly difficult to measure or not as difficult, but has similarities with ocean-based technologies. And so I expect that until these technologies can be really financed at scale, especially when it comes to company actions, or when companies, private actors want to finance these activities, we need a bit more research. But I see all of these technologies important and scaling up, but in a different order and timeline.
Yeah, speaking of financing, we can't avoid touching on the criticism of carbon credits, particularly in the light of the Guardian's investigation and findings about the amount of faulty credits. It's caused a lot of heated discussion on the subject, and I think it's safe to say that it's planted a lot of doubt in the power of the voluntary carbon market to accelerate climate action. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, personally, it disappoints me, and I'm really sad about the fact that these projects fall short of their promises and plans, and that it puts so much reputational damage, or causes so much reputational damage on the industry, and also on many actors that are with the right intentions active in that field. So I don't want to blame people for I mean, there are probably individuals who did wrong, most probably. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened, right? But I think, in principle, we haven't. We have good and bad things in the voluntary carbon market. The good things are there are economic incentive schemes that help us to reduce emissions at places where it's economically more attractive to do so. So more bang for the buck. That is basically a good idea of the Kyoto Protocol, which was obviously not only voluntary. So that is a good economic measure. And when you look at carbon removal, a similar economic measure is needed to subsidize the activities. So we need some financing instruments to pay for these activities. And so if we just blame the market to be ineffective and faulty and wrong and the wrong model, that's throwing out the baby with the bathtub. So we should be aware that it's a bit more tricky. When I look at my personal view, the root cause is when we look at carbon removal as an example, not the emission avoidance and these activities that have been under scrutiny and assessed to be not delivering what they promised, but take as an example carbon removal, direct air capture. You invest a lot in these activities, extract carbon, you have energy costs, you have to deploy the machinery, and you have to store the carbon somewhere. All cost, no benefit. So who benefits? It's the society overall and its future societies. So in order to finance these activities, we need to those who pay are not actually in the private market. Companies are not actually the ones that directly benefit. They might benefit on the marketing on the marketing side, brand building side, but of the actual activity, everybody on Earth should benefit because it's climate protection. So how can we create instruments that make this economic frameworks work? Usually, when you put something in the market, it's a good that the customers benefit from directly. For example, to increase joy, comfort, or safety, or whatever. So here is a bit different. So we have an economic activity, or we have an activity that's economically not directly valuable to the buyer. So in a normal capitalistic framework, you would try to reduce the cost of the good you are selling by whatever means. So that could be reducing the amount of CO2 you actually safely store. You just remove it and you don't store everything or whatever. You kind of exaggerate the value of your good, and you diminish your costs. That is the economics incentives are like that. So how can we counteract that? And I think there's two key measures we have. One is transparency, and the second one is accountability and a closed chain of contracts. This is what we really have to bring in the system, and of course accompanied by governance framework that avoid adverse incentive, like by a separation of duties. So the standard setters should be different from those who benefit directly from selling the credits. And that's the way to go, I think. And we can just learn from these scandals and shortcomings and try to make it better at any cost. Because if we in the carbon removal space, we are not per se protected from this, because also here people can exaggerate. We see errors, and we really have to be diligent and improve. And that is why we are also with Carbonfuture building this transparency and trust infrastructure to make it efficient and easy to establish controls and really make sure that the carbon is actually removed and people can be held accountable and so on. So let's learn from these incidents and just make it better, and don't blame people. Most of the people who were involved, I think, had good intentions.
Speaking of building infrastructure and a network, maybe we've been following Carbonfuture's progress over the past few months, and we've seen the company forge a number of partnerships, most notably and most recently with Puro Earth, which is a leading carbon removal standard and registry. And you also recently teamed up with Caesar, a platform for purchasing and management of negative emissions. We actually had the pleasure of interviewing Magnus, the CEO, just recently, and we hope to have him as a guest on the podcast as well in the future. But circling back to these partnerships, can you tell us more about what they look like and what they aim to achieve?
Yeah, thanks. Wonderful. Thanks for following us, and thanks for looking into that so closely and directly. I mean, carbon removal is a huge task, and we can't do it alone, right? So we provide like MRV infrastructure. We do due diligence. We assess supplier projects, and we try to qualify projects, and we bring removal credits to companies. And we can't do it alone. We need the supplier projects that actually do the physical work. We need the standards that give us rules against which we can measure and quantify. And that's what Puro does. They are kind of the rule setters, those who give us the strict guidelines, what we need to or what our supplier projects need to deliver. And on the downstream side, we need buyers, we need corporate buyers that want to engage in that market and finance it. And we are, as an ecosystem infrastructure, and we are following an ecosystem infrastructure approach, and so we need partners to deliver that. With Puro Earth, it's really Puro is an independent standard in the voluntary carbon market. Just like Vera or Gold Standard or Carbon Standards International, there are a couple, and for the different supplier projects out there globally, there's not necessarily one standard that's the best for each supplier project globally. So we need to be able to offer a range of opportunities to go to the market, and Puro has done a great job in like forwarding methodologies for durable carbon removals. And now that they are doubling down on being a standard and leaving the marketplace side to others, so they are kind of they made this step to separate their activities here and be independent as a standard. So that opened the possibility for us to collaborate, and we are very happy about that. And I think they know a lot about carbon removal, and they learned a lot. And we have been in competition on the marketplace side for a couple of years, and so we know each other also quite well. And I think from both sides is now a great moment to join forces, especially by adding our Carbonfuture MRV Plus, so the trust layer top of funnel, where we do due diligence and carbon removal tracking and collect all the data digitally, so that it's getting easier and more cost efficient for the suppliers to adhere to all the rules, and also to make it possible then for buyers to have a look through to all the data. So that's a benefit for the partners of Puro. It's a benefit for us that we can jointly address a broader part of the market. And with Caesar, it's a bit different. That's more the companies which we are servicing jointly here. Caesar has a broader offering. They are also offering emission avoidance credits. They are also offering short-lived or managed removals like forestry credits or mangroves or so, which we don't. And many companies follow a portfolio approach here. They are not fully yet on durable carbon removals. I hope like the whole market shifts to durable carbon removals. But there are many companies out there who need a broader offering, where we need to partner with others that service these companies more holistically. And an example would be Caesar. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does, and it actually it sounds optimistic. So on that note, as a final question before we wrap up the episode, I like to ask perhaps if you have a message of hope, let's say, with regards to the future of the voluntary carbon markets. Basically, how do you see things developing over the next couple of years? And do you believe there's still a fighting chance for the VCMs to bring about meaningful climate impact?
Okay, so my hope is actually a bit broader than only to the VCM, but when I answer this question specifically for the VCM, I would say the most important task for the VCM is to probe and showcase like processes and governance and rules and certification schemes and all that, what we are doing, showcase and set the bar as high as possible to force regulated schemes to not fall short. So I think that is the most significant impact the VCM can have. And when we look at it a bit more specifical, I think that the VCM will have a role also when the regulatory market starts, because the regulatory markets typically start sector-specific, region-specific, and they are also like using certain elements of the VCM. So there will be an interplay between both, and I think it is a necessarily a highly growing sector, also specifically to durable carbon removal. Of course, we see a huge growth there. We see very, very promising developments in regulation, in particular on the EU level with the carbon removal certification framework, CRCF, which is about to be finalized, which is kind of the most broadly discussed framework for carbon removal ever. And there's a lot of elements from the VCM in this framework, and we see direct air capture, we see bioenergy carbon capture and storage, we see biochar carbon removal covered there, and I think there will be a landscape where the VCM and the regulated markets complement each other. And I also hope, and I'm also positive about that the removal markets will play their role in mitigating the climate crisis and complement, hopefully, that we also will be successful on reducing emissions, because it's sad to see and terrifying to see that we as humans do not succeed at all by removing or reducing emissions.
Yes, of course. Thanks so much, Hannes. Thank you for your insights, for your time. It was a genuine pleasure to have you here with us today, as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Violet. It was a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.